that?
Yeah, Art, just a brief overview. I guess I have it broken down in two sections. How do we get here, and where do we go going forward? So I'm going to do a high level overview because I don't want to take too much time. But basically, in terms of Coach Simmons leaving, and folks like Jimmy Mack and some other folks probably already know this from other conversations. This was like the worst kept secret in the world because I mean, and I have some things documented, but basically, I mean, we from the time that Coach Simmons was hired, and I know he's been a hot name for about 10 years now. And I think going back to some of the previous conversations in other forums, we were looking at him back at 2013, 2014, but I guess the conventional thought was that he wasn't ready yet. Then he went and did his coaching circuit, then went to PV, was at Alcorn, and then eventually ended up with us. But as soon as we signed the contract in December 2017, some of us, like Kelvin, myself, and others, like, he's not going to be here long. He's too young. He's basically got the profile of a turnaround coach, a turnaround artist, and those are on high demand, and he's hungry. So I don't know, if this caught anybody by surprise, then you really weren't paying attention. Other things, he's been on podcasts when he first came over from Prayer Review. He still had some of the first podcasts on with Mike Prince, who was, I guess, a radio personality in the Houston area. And I
Yes.
think he may have been on the call for summer. He's PV of Prairie View affiliated. So I don't know if he's the play-by-play person or something along those lines. Even the first few conversations, they talked about eventuality of getting back to FBS and whether that was still a goal. And Coach Simmons never hit it. When Holly Rowe came and spoke to the Tallahassee QB Club in 2019, she did, I guess, what she calls her on-the-spot interview, or what she call it, like a selfie interview. And basically, she put it on Facebook and said he's a rising coaching star.
Hmm.
In 2021, Coach Simmons became a part of the National Coalition of Minority Coaches as one of the 13 FCS coaches to get paired up with a panel of coaches and former ADs. And I believe his mentor was Debbie Yao, the first woman uh, athletic director in the ACC at Maryland NC State, to interview and learn what these candidates need to do in order to progress to FBS.
Hmm.
In the What About Us episode, I didn't get the exact episode number, but I watched all 8 episodes in 2021. He said the question was asked. I don't know if it was like an off the question or however, but it came, if he got an FBS opportunity, would he listen? He said, you know what? It'd be hard to leave FAMU, but I would have to listen. I'd at least take a listen. So there've been breadcrumbs throughout the year since he got here. And, then eventually 2021, we know he got a serious offer from South Carolina. We heard about it through the grapevine or through, it didn't get the same publicity as this, but we heard about it. The other thing, and this is like how we got to this point. So I'm just laying that groundwork. The other thing, and I won't go into detail because it'll be in the paper, but basically, you look at his coaches' promotions over the last 6 years, 5 seed playing seasons. He's had one, two, three, at least 10 coaches, 10 plus coaches move on to other jobs. At some point, he's going to adopt the same mentality of the name of that documentary. What about us? What about me? Not saying that this was, the all-time worst position in the world, but you have coaches going to FBS. Coach Henry, Joe Henry came back, but he went to Arkansas, Missouri, Arkansas, LSU. Coach Black went to the Rams. Coach Kenneth Killstrap, our original DB, one of our original DB coaches. He went to his alma mater, Middle Tennessee, and now he's at UAB. One of the other original DB coaches, Brandon Sharp, he's now a defensive assistant with Purdue. So the list goes on. And Alex Jackson, his first original OL offensive line offensive coordinator, co-offensive coordinator, left, went to become an offensive analyst for Tennessee, and I believe he came back to Alabama State. So you see, there's at least 10 other people who have gone on to other jobs at other universities that, based on their profile and their level of play, us being at FCS, went to at least the FBS level, a group of 5 at the very least. So in the back of your mind, you're thinking, hey, I'm 42, 43. Where's my opportunity? So that's another breadcrumb. And the thing that I worked on today a little bit, while we're here, the case for an extension or an increase in salary. And it's something I told y'all I wanted to add to this because I thought it was critical, was that it's something that crystallized when I saw something last night, that he's been in the same salary since he signed his original contract. And my understanding, at least from the reporting of the Tallahassee Democrat, his extension in 2021 did not include a salary increase. But yet he has gone, what, 22 and 2, maybe 23 and 2 if you include the SWAC championship games, since being in the SWAC. He's had 4 straight playing seasons of 9+ wins. And in my opinion, it could have been 5 if 3 plays would have gone differently in 2018, his first season, versus Jackson State, versus Bethune, and versus Howard. So, we're looking at an overall record. I believe it was 43-13 or 42-13. I just looked at the number, but I don't recall it right. But it's something like that. Basically, almost a 750 or better winning percentage since he came to FAMU. Has not had a salary increase. And considering where he brought the program from, coming off a 1-10 season from Alex Woods last season, and he hasn't had a salary increase in 6 years, and the magnitude to which he's brought this program, and the other thing that you can't really quantify but should be dialed in, the community impact that he's had. He won 2019 Tallahassee Democrat Person of the Year. He's been a strong advocate against gun violence. He has energized the FAMU program, and I have a lot more words in here. I don't want to, but in terms of a qualitative impact upon the FAMU community and the Big Bend as a whole, that plus his on-field accolades would seemingly merit a salary increase, or at least having a discussion. And at first, and I got, corrected last night, but at first I was thinking, I might have done the same thing, like, hey, let's wait till the end of the season, and see what the championship, how things turn out for 2023. But then upon reflection, when I saw what I saw, I was like, well, you know what? If you look at the depths to which the program has come from, and it speaks to your point a little bit, Brian, about having 3 ADs, and we get that, what's the word? Not amnesia, but you don't get that collective knowledge. And we go from John Eason, interim Mike Smith, and then VP AD Sykes. I'm sorry, and VP AD Gaucher, and then Sykes. So then we actually have 4.
So then you had Michael Smith.
Yeah, I include Michael Smith, but you lose a little collective knowledge and memory there that. And I know people have followed the program, but unless you were really following it during the Alex Wood era and how things just didn't seem to go well, and it was a continuation of everything seemingly either treading water or going on a downturn since Joe Taylor left, you don't understand the depth from which Simmons brought this program. And then to not have, to have the same salary, because I don't know everything going on in the background, but they have the same salary for 6 years when you go from 1-10 and being, pretty much at the valley of the program in its entire existence, 100+ year existence. And then to cap it off with a SWAC championship, 12-1, number 1 defense, number 5 at this point from the last coaches poll, and to do all that and to, I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but to not have had what we know, and it could have been private, but to what we know of not having an increase in salary just based on performance, not to mention the intangibles in terms of community impact. That's another reason, probably, I'm speculating, but I'm just laying this out, why we're here. Now going forward.
Hold on, can I jump
yes.
in because I think this is relevant to what you're asking. EA is asking, how can we go year after year not paying people their contractually obligated money? EA, great question.
Yes, and I agree.
Send that email to Dr. Larry Robinson. Send that letter to Dr. Larry Robinson in Lee Hall. And then also now CC it to VP AD Tiffany Dawn Sykes.
As well as the trustee chair.
Exactly. The trustee chair, the new one.
We got a new chair.
We got a new chair. So
with the other piece of that, Brian, is that you don't want to throw people under the bus or organizations under the bus. But if there are DSOs that were supposed to make contributions in order to meet the obligations, and if they haven't built the infrastructure such that they have a continuous fundraising component in order to meet the obligations, then they got to call them on the carpet too. I don't know who does what, but the fact of the matter is that Coach Simmons and the coaches, and for all we know, all the coaches have
Obligations
signed
have been met.
our contractual obligations based on the salary, and if we're coming up short, then that kind of contribute. If you can't get a raise, but if you're not even getting what you're supposed to get, then you're not going to get a raise. But then it begs the question about how we do business and how we need to do better. Now, reasons for optimism, because I don't want to leave this all out, and this is all in the document. The first thing is the events of this past weekend. That shows when you, like Kenya said, you lay out a vision plan, actionable items, people are going to step to the bat. Then, and that happened this weekend. And that's where I asked Mr. Johnson, how can we be more proactive? And it goes back to my first point. When we saw that Coach Simmons got hired December 2017, I know me and Kelvin and a few other people had discussions in a separate forum. He's not going to be here long, especially if we believe he's going to be the coach that we brought him here to be, and he checks off some or all of these incentives in the contract with his age, his acumen, and ambition. He is not going to be here long. And it kind of goes to my third point, which I'm going to get to. And I know Dr. Cavill and others have seen it because I posted it way back on the MEAC Fan Zone forum. Actually, I get to it now. But this past weekend shows what we can do when we put our effort into it. And if we do it proactively versus reactively, we could be in even better position to make sure we either retain coaches or, going to my second point, what I call the launching pad cradle of coaches. And this, we talked about this back in 2007 when Reuben Carter was let go, was that the paradigm now, we don't have coaches like Coach Gaither and Coach Robinson who are going to go from age 25 until they go home to see the Lord at the same position. These coaches in our society is very transactional and very, again, I want to say nomadic, but we'll go from job to job and looking for promotion. So in 2007, before we hired Coach Taylor, we talked about in a private forum that we need to fashion our HBCUs, and I was thinking FAMU specifically, but there are others that are in a similar position in terms of attractiveness, fashion it after what the Mid-American Conference schools did in the early 2000s, and the mid-majors continue to do, mid-majors in basketball. They always have turnaround coaches who, like for 2 years, might get an upset of March Madness, might have like a Northern Illinois in the mid 2000s, have a star player or two and knock off somebody like an Oklahoma or a Florida State in the Orange Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl. Next thing you know, their coach is the next hot thing, and the Power Five that's down on its luck for a short period of time is looking for some energy, plucks that coach. If we fashioned our athletic departments in a similar fashion to be that swift and deft to be able to identify young talent and promote ourselves and promote the coaches, that, hey, you can get there from here, which is a model that our team, our school has adopted for Isaiah Land, Xavier Smith, and Marquise Bell in terms of getting to the NFL. Why not do the same for coaches? And I know we're wishing Coach Simmons well and not wishing him any ill will. But the thing is, it's like, well, hey, if you're a young coach and you want to get there from here, FAMU is set up to do so. Now we need to do that. And we need to make sure our processes, procedures, and our paradigms, our mentality from the athletic department and the fans, not casting aspersions or throwing stones at the coach for bouncing. But hey, he went from our school to now 3 years later, he's in the national championship game. He came from FAMU. We do that for the students. We do that for the athletes in the NFL. Why can't we do that for the coaches? But we need to set ourselves up mentally and structurally in the athletic department to take advantage of that. So that was the concept we talked about 15, 16 years ago. And I think we've gotten better because we've had younger ADs and a shift in mentality not to expect a coach to coach for life. But we still need to structure it and even promote. And yeah, you might say, well, that might encourage a school to come take our coach. But if a young coach who's looking to go further along says he can come to FAMU for 3 or 4 years, and you spoke to it earlier, and even Vaughn spoke to it earlier on the live show this afternoon, that coaches aren't nowadays, the youth and coaches, even some of the older coaches, with the exception of Saban and a few others, aren't looking to stay there 10 plus years unless they're at the top of the mountain. But anybody looking to climb to the top is looking to use a stepping stone. So why not fashion ourselves and counter the narrative that HBCUs are dead end jobs, which was the narrative at the time when we started talking about this in 2007, was that okay, we can only look at a certain amount of coaches because the perception is right or wrong. You get stuck at HBCU, you don't get any progression, nobody looks at you. Well, we've had a few opportunities in both football and basketball that have bucked that trend, but you have to embrace it and make sure your department is set up for it in terms of identifying young talent when the coach goes and when the coach is looking, not that you want him to leave, but if you promote him to a certain degree and put things in him or her in place in order to make that ascension, he or she can speak well of your program, and that I didn't feel inhibited, I felt supported. And the other component of that is making sure that you have suitable talent in the athletic department and in the administration that can identify someone who's going to be an up and coming star. Now, we did that with Coach Simmons, and I believe the other day, Kelvin, when I was looking at the video of last week, you said Coach Eason made that call because he had an experience at Florida State and he knew what to look for. Well, we need more of that so you can identify and continue to promote people who will be young stars and say, I got my start at such and such. And even last year, I think when off script went to, is it the last year, 2 years ago, when he went to the SEC media days and he asked the coach about his start at South Carolina State, and he got some props for that. But that coach got his start, or at least had some of his formative things at South Carolina State, and he can reflect back upon it and speak upon well about his time at South Carolina State because that was his quote unquote launching pad. Third thing. The third thing was the autonomy of the VPAD role. So this is things to look forward to. We'll have to see if that actually happens because we know how things go down, and we've seen it with Texas Southern, and we've seen it in the past with FAMU. But VPAD Sykes did, as far as we know, made the call with our women's basketball coach. So if she's asked the autonomy, she can either set us on a course to continue doing well, or it's going to set us back. But that autonomy, at least to some degree, cuts out the red tape and bureaucracy that inhibits identifying people and creating fiascos that don't reflect well on the administrations at HBCUs, which is another thing we've been fighting. Either you get stuck in a dead-end job, or you get all this undue influence and everybody trying to be a chief and nobody wanting to be, a worker bee in making the decision for hiring a coach. I can understand everyone wants some input, those who have influence and those who are stakeholders, but sometimes it gets a little prohibitive. And so whatever she's empowered to do, whatever that may be, we don't know. We'll see, because we know football is typically king at HBCUs with few exceptions. We'll see what she's empowered to do, what decisions she's allowed to make in terms of selecting candidates, presenting candidates for approval. So that could be a positive, but that's dependent on how much range she's given. But more or less, that's what I'm saying, how we ended up here and going forward, what we can do. But I think the things that we showed this weekend in terms of the financial fundraising with a plan, and hopefully countering some narrative, and we have to be held true to it as well. Counting the narrative of like, oh, why am I sending this money in? They can't be trusted with it. Countering the narrative of you can't get there from here in terms of our athletic departments, and countering the narrative and setting up the infrastructure so that the ADs are empowered to make a choice and to live and die by that choice and be held accountable for it, instead of having board interference, powerful booster behind the closed doors interference, all this stuff that inhibits a smooth process. And that's all I got. But it's in much more detail in the document, but all those things. But in terms of Coach Simmons going to Duke, I'm not sure why anybody would be surprised. He's young, ambitious, and there are other components in his ambition. Probably the lack of, as far as we know, discussion on salary, since he's had the same salary for 6 years. And I know for some of us, if we had the same salary for 6 years in our positions, we'd be bucking tables and everything. So I don't know why we'd expect him to do any different, especially bringing the program for where it was. Oh,
Wow.
and the other thing,
Yeah.
in terms of the booster organs and DSOs, I think great job funding the money. But one of my long term challenges has been understanding whose function is what. And that's
Thank
kind of
you.
the reason why I asked Coach, I mean, not Coach, Mr. Johnson, Curtis
Curtis.
Johnson, because, asking about the money, like the 138 was strictly NA and then there may be other pockets. Okay, if there's an organization that's dedicated to not necessarily one sport, but one,
Athletics. There
well,
is.
well, not athletics, but say even, well, maybe athletics, but say if even if there's one that's okay, we're doing fundraising for facilities. Okay, we're doing fundraising for recruiting or something along those lines. A clear understanding of who is doing what, because I think that also contributes, that what I call market confusion contributes to folks feeling like, well, what's being done with the money? I just gave to that organization. Now this organization asking me for money. But if they have two different purposes and it's not clear, then the average donor is going to feel like, they're bleeding me dry and I don't know what is being used for. And the organization may have two different purposes, or they may have the same purpose, which is redundant. And we're sending money to two different people and not understanding what's going on, and then feeling like we're getting sucked dry and being, taken advantage of. So that clarity needs to happen as well.
Which is why, Marcus, I challenge Curtis to be the catalyst for exactly that. I totally agree with you that we don't have the structure or the expertise or the care, frankly, from internal administrative sources to do anything, which is why all the things you presented, as you talked about, we've discussed for 15, 16 years now. We, it, I mean, the stuff with the P3, the strategic plans for athletics, we've read and reviewed all that stuff. Work has been done. Right now, there's a group, First Strike, that is trying to do some things with athletics that will put money in their coffers as well as help with some facility stuff. But at some point, we have to move this stuff forward and we have to have people in position, or we have to force people into positions that are leaders that will make some of this stuff happen. My problem is not that we don't know, not that we don't have ideas, not that it is not being presented. It's just not being acted upon. And that is frustrating as heck.